Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Hold it in and release. Inhale. Hold it in this time and imagine a stream. Hear that gentle lapping of the water. Dip your feet in and release. What's that in the water? It looks like a body floating by.
Oops.
Oh, there's another. Release. Let all the air out from your lungs and release. Release. That's it. Be one with the water and release. And welcome to Fearmongers. I'm your host, Clay McLeod Chapman, and tonight, holy moly, do we have a doozy for you. Author of 30 books. They're like 30 plus. I was trying to like do a tally, and I think like maybe there's more than 30. I had to give up. Like I stopped at 30. But
We're announcing one on Halloween, so
no, really?
yeah.
That's like well, okay. I mean, you could
31.
give a little bit of a clue tonight. Author of such books as Bloom, The Violence, Guillotine, and the recently released, I was going to say upcoming, but it is out. It is done. It Will Only Hurt for a Moment. We have the one, the only Delilah S. Dawson. Hello, Delilah. How are you?
I could not be better. How are you?
I'm great. I get to hang out with the two of you. This is
Although I
amazing.
am reading What Kind of Mother, and I don't want to go in the water that you tell me to go into.
No, don't go near the water. Don't go near the water. The editor of the amazing anthology Bury Your Gaze, from Ghoulish Books, by the way, and the author of the recently released and amazing Coup de Grace. Every time I watch so many or listen to so many podcasts and interviews with you this week, and every host or interviewer apologizes the second they say your title because they're like, "Oh, my French is awful." But Coup de Grace, Coupe de Grace.
Perfect.
You
Sometimes
have to
people say coup de grace, and that's like cut of fat. So the glass is important.
yeah. You basically just have to humor every conversation partner you have and be like, "Yep, that's close enough, right?" Sure. Author
Let's go
of
with it.
Coup de Grace. It is none other than the amazing Sofia Ajram. Hello, Sophia. How are you?
I'm good. I love this energy. Thank you for having
Yeah.
us.
I mean, here's the thing. What really kind of makes me excited to talk to the two of you is together is this fact that things are a little like my personal anxiety is at a kind of peak, and I'm really I've been desiring catharsis like you would not believe, and the world is just not giving it to me right now, and I have had to hide in horror in ways that I don't think I ever have before. And not to kind of bog us down straight out of the gates, but this is a really scary time. I don't know if I'm projecting here. Forgive me if you guys are feeling great, but it's I I don't know. I feel as if what makes me want to talk to the two of you specifically and to talk about coup de grace and It Will Only Hurt for a Moment is that these books in particular, I feel, offer a sense of catharsis for those readers who are willing to take the journey. And both of these books have they're sojourns, and you kind of have to come out the other end a little beaten and a little bloody. So I don't know. My question straight out of the gates is to the panel: where we are now, what is the need for horror when you can kind of open up the newspaper or look out the window and, find it, you know, pretty much everywhere.
If you want to go ahead.
Sophia.
Okay.
Um, okay, so my feeling on it is I think every time we get like a big zombie movie or like book that comes out, I feel as though it's like a symptom of the times where people are looking for somewhere to project like a physical creature that you can project like evil onto, because a lot of the times institution and things like that feel like they're so big and faceless that they can't be overcome. So I feel like turning to horror is a way for people to have that catharsis, like you were saying, where you can have an evil and like sometimes it wins, but sometimes it is something that we can overcome. And there are rules that it plays by. And if we come together, like as a community, um, that there's a way out
Yeah.
of whatever it is that's making us suffer. So that's always what I think of.
I mean, do you find that, it's interesting that you bring up the zombie metaphor because I feel like, to each generation there is a new kind of Romero era, like,
Hmm.
and but I find with horror now, particularly in what's getting published, is that, like, you know pick your anxiety, pick your fear, pick your, that, like, there's almost like an outlet for each and every kind of uh, social moray, or kind of panic that we're experiencing. And I I wonder if that's a good thing, if this is a great kind of sign. Like, maybe I'm asking, like, where's the cart and where's the horse, and what's coming first? Is it that, like, the world in of itself is kind of at this place, and therefore horror is emulating that or responding to that, or is it the other way around?
Now, maybe Delilah can speak on this. I feel as though it's a bit of a cyclical thing,
Yeah.
um, where we just keep coming back to the same like beat patterns in history. Unfortunately, one day we will learn, and
Does it feel
hopefully it's
like
like one
history's
step.
repeating itself, though, then? Like, does it feel like this is like, oh, we were I mean, I know I feel like we were here 8 years ago. Like, I
Mhm.
think there's the kind of election cycle, but is there more beyond that?
I'm not sure. I think generally, I don't want to like speak out of turn, but I remember seeing this like whiteboard clip once where someone was talking about the generations over the past maybe 100 years. And then it was so surreal. He could basically graft over top of it like beat patterns to each generation and what had happened. And then um, there were like lulls of like good moments that would come up, and then there would be some sort of like institutional madness that would happen, and then anarchy, and then it would sort of like rinse and repeat. So I
Mhm.
feel as though it might not necessarily be like the 8-year cycle. I'm in Canada, but we're feeling it up here too. But I do think that historically that just tends to happen, and it feels like horror is following a really similar almost pattern. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm of the mindset that horror is never sort of out, that there's always um gonna be, you know, a stream for it.
Yeah. Permutations, evolutions. Delilah, I mean, like, 30 books, 31 books. Like, do you ever have you ever kind of stepped back and kind of looked at the chronology of your catalog and said, okay, that's where we were at that point in time, as a society, as like, well, that was the thing that I was tackling or grappling with in this particular book, or do they kind of feed into some larger kind of ethos of fear?
I mean, you can go through and trace the whatever um, anxieties or traumas were coming to the fore, kind of rising up at that time. Or, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of things around my neurodivergent diagnoses and self-discovery in those ways. So like, I'm sure with each book I could say, oh, there's what I was grappling with. Look at it right there. Like that's how I was kind of feeling it out and seeing what was going on. But I also, I write really fast, and I really enjoy it. So it doesn't really feel like work. So it isn't one of those things where I'm like, oh, I really need a break. Like if I go on vacation, I'm like, oh my God, I can have 2 hours to write at the beach. So it just keeps going, and I have to diversify. It's like, you remember Better Off Dead? Go that way really fast. Something gets in your way, turn. So every time
Yeah.
I get a non-compete, I have to go, okay, well, okay, now it's novellas. Okay, well, now it's middle grade. Okay, I got to go back to comics. So that's what it is whatever I am available to write at that time, or whatever IP I can get into, and then contrast that with whatever like soul boil is cankering up out of my skin, getting ready to explode, and that's what you end up with.
Do the soul boils bubble up often? Like, is it kind of like a cauldron that's like kind of constantly at a simmer, or do you find that it kind of percolates and has its moment and then kind of like calms down, and that's when you kind of focus on IP or yeah, I
Well, no,
guess I'm
even
like,
those I use, like Rise of the Red Blade, my latest Star Wars book is if you read it as someone, an autistic person trying to live under a religious cult during wartime, you can read it that way, and you can see her, those steps of discovering who she is, and trying to reject, this kind of heavy oppressive force that's trying to fit her into a round box when she is a square peg. But you can go back to the violence. Like I wrote that kind of recently after my dad had died, and so I was working through a lot of stuff with him. I was finally allowed to actually speak about with him gone. um, this latest book, It Will Only Hurt in the Moment, is about something that happened to me in Tampa, where I got randomly roofied at a restaurant while I was out to a fancy dinner with my husband.
oh my
And I
God.
had to kind of work through the trauma of that. So whatever I'm writing, I find a way to, or accidentally manage to shoehorn in my issues. But that's not, they're not usually issues book. They're just, that person happens to be going through that. Except for Guillotine was just, I got real sick of billionaires having mega yachts. Wanted to punish them.
Do you find that after you've kind of put the story on the page, like, do you feel that sense of catharsis? Like, do you feel like as if something has kind of been released, or is it just always there?
Well, catharsis is kind of my brand. I think all of my books have built-in catharsis. Like the people who need to die die in my books. Like enough
Mhm.
of us in real life have to deal with people who won't die, who deserve to die. So in my books, the bad people die. But I think the catharsis for me comes from knowing that it's out there, and that people that have had a similar experience know that they're not alone. The kind of abuse I grew up with, people didn't believe us. It's a very specific kind of domestic abuse. And I thought I was the only person in the world who had to live like this, until I saw a therapist who was like, no, this is what was happening. And, this is all real, and this is what abuse is. And so the thought that someone else might read that and be like, oh, I'm not alone. And the same with my kids' horror books. Mine here is about a drama kid whose dad doesn't like her. And yeah, she's being haunted in a hoarder's house, but like that's her soul journey, is the fact that like her dad doesn't like her. And most kids never really think about that. Oh my God, like people actually don't like their kids. Yeah, some parents really don't like their kids, and they tell them that. So maybe a kid will read that and be like, oh, I'm not alone. I can still have adventures, and be like terribly frightened of a ghost.
Yeah. No, it's that connectivity that I feel like really, you want readers to kind of find the story that they need in order to kind of achieve that catharsis. And I keep coming back to the word catharsis because I remember reading an interview with you, Sophia, where you mentioned kind of the need of catharsis in horror. So I kind of want to bring it back to coup de grace, because for me, that book in particular is a journey that, I maybe I should start by asking if you could give us the kind of like the explanation of like what is this story to you? What is coup de grace?
Um, I want to give a little content warning before I begin, because this book has a lot to do with depression and suicidality and self harm. And when Delilah was talking about their experience with sort of putting their personal experiences on the page, I was like, oh my God, yes, like I relate to that so much. It's very much a book that feels intimate. Um, It is about a man who's on his way to take his own life. He's taking the subway to get to the end of the line. He wants to disembark at Terminus and then walk right into the river in Montreal. But when he gets out, he's not at Terminus. He's at a station that doesn't exist. And it is this enormous station that has no exits and it's multiplying off of itself. And I really wanted to look at what does it feel when something like depression or being suicidal, which is supposed to be like we see it so often as a short, like a moment in time that you get through, um, how it feels so long and it feels so overwhelming and it feels so empty and it feels so lonely. Um, and so I wanted to, I guess, graft that onto the concept of liminal space, where it's like this space that's supposed to be empty and might have once been filled with people, but isn't. And yeah, that was really the sort of core of the story that I was writing. So I related a lot to what Delilah was saying about sort of self-inserting pepperings of, your own experience, which I feel like is common, from writer to writer, where you're like, oh, there, I was actually dealing with this while I was while I was writing this story, and you like don't even realize until after, when you sort of come out on the other side.
Yeah. Um, but there was like a sense of discovery with the writing of this book that like where you started, like maybe it's the kind of the origin of the book versus the kind of final, the end result. Like there was, I mean, there's a quite a transformation with the genesis of this one, correct? Like how did it
Yeah.
start? Like what was it in the beginning?
It started off as a project where I wanted to look at liminal space, but with a group of people. So like what can liminality look like? Um, I was thinking of like someone who is escaping from an area of war, or someone who is sick, or someone who is going through a gender transition. It was all these sort of moments in time, that you are in and then come out of. And then when I was speaking to Neil McRobert on Talking Scared, he was like, it feels as though we globally sort of went through a liminal state when COVID happened. Because due to the pandemic, we were all just sort of like locked in, and there were all these spaces that used to be occupied by people. And then all of a sudden they were empty. And we couldn't really be in communion with each other in the way that we used to be. So the story started off like that, as like almost an expedition into this space with a group of people. And it got to the point where I was like, this feels really big. Like it feels like I'm trying to tackle a lot. I really wanted it to be a novella, which was just sort of a technical constraint that I had when I was writing the story. And so I parsed it down to one instance of liminality, which was someone's experience with depression and suicidality. And I was like, actually, I have a lot to say about this, because
Mm.
these are feelings I've been dealing with for like my entire adult life. So that made it almost easier to extrapolate into like chapter segments where it's like, how does depression, what does it do to the body? What does it do to your sex drive? What does it do to your ability to eat food, or to feel nauseous, or to feel good about things, or to feel hope? Um, so it just sort of narrowed in to that, once I was in the later drafts.
And was that kind of discovery an organic one? Like, did you all of a sudden kind of realize, like, oh, this is the character I'm gravitating more towards Vicken than any of the others, or was it like a conscious decision? Like, I'm
Sort
gonna
of.
write from.
I had like a weird experience where, when I was initially writing it, and then there was this expedition group, it felt like I was philosophizing about liminality in a lot of ways. Because if I got too much into the character backstories, it felt like there was so much like plot going on. And so it ended up becoming this ephemeral thing. And I got annoyed with my own writing, where I was like, no, this sounds sort of pretentious. Like, what the fuck? And so I went to go lie down, and I ended up writing just in my notes app on my phone a chapter where it was like a character responding to me, as the author. Um, and so the character was like, oh, do I get out of this space? Okay, cool. High five God, and like my life is suddenly better. Like, of course it's not going to be better. And so that voice, that like interaction, felt like something that I wanted to explore. And then that voice ended up being the narrator of Coup de Classe, who was Vicken.
That's amazing. So, does there exist this kind of alternate, like this like shed skin of a book? Like all of these other chapters, all of these other characters, like could you release like kind of novella after novella of all these other, like the expedition, the some of these other kind of liminal transitional characters? Like, does that exist on the page as like on your hard drive somewhere?
There's literally like an entire book that I
Oh
read,
my
which is just
God.
wild to me. But then there's like, you end up, I don't know if this is the case for you too, but I sort of dissected certain, even if it's like lines that I like,
Yeah.
or like characters, I'll steal them away for other projects. And then it becomes this just like Frankenstein if you ever go back to it. But yeah, I don't know if
It
that's
wants to
like an
live. It
experience for
wants
you.
to like, it just wants to be free and be loved. Um, I'm just amazed that like this idea of like, you could just come back to you can always come back to the subway station of Montreal.
Right?
We'll be waiting, Sophia. Um, but it is, I mean, you speak to this idea of kind of liminal spaces, and I know you've kind of spoken a lot about this, but what I love is that the text itself, the book itself, becomes its own kind of liminal space, like who you are in the beginning as the reader versus who you are at the end of the experience is so like that is different for in essence everybody who comes in contact with this book. And I don't want to give away too much, but I like, have you is are we allowed to kind of speak about like where the book goes towards the end, or do you want to keep that kind of mum?
I don't mind either way. I never know if like spoilers are a good thing or not. I don't know in your experience.
This is your
Um,
warning, everybody. Spoilers ahead. But it's amazing. I mean, like you speak so much about this idea of the kind of the subway station and particularly the subways of Montreal, but this idea of a labyrinth uh underground, and then and then the book itself takes all of these kind of turns to the extent that it becomes in essence a choose your own adventure book. And by doing that, you're giving a certain kind of agency to the reader, but also cutting them loose. And that was really scary for like it was like I personally had a kind of like odd anxiety of like, like I don't like the first time I read it, I literally just read it linearly. Like I just like
oh my
I
God, you and so many people. It's so interesting
really.
to see. Yeah.
So, do people like have you had this discussion with folks where they are like, "Oh, I went on the journey and I ended up here," versus I just went straight through.
Yeah. I love to ask if people are open to it. I'm like, what sort of dialogue choice did you pick
Mhm.
when you got near the end? And it's been really interesting to see people's experience with reading it. Some people really connect with it, some people really don't connect with it. Um,
Really? What
and
is that pushback? Like what do you think the resistance is?
I'm
Like
not sure.
I can't do that. I can't do
There's
two chapters.
some, yeah, there's some folks where it's like, I don't, it's almost the discomfort of being made to make the choice for someone where, um, I guess I'm thinking of like, I don't know if you folks have like seen or read the book They Shoot Horses, Don't They? But the whole sort of plot of it revolves around this concept of, um, if there's a horse that's injured and can no longer walk, is the merciful thing to do, um, to end its life or to uh, help it continue on for a little bit longer? What is the hopeful thing to do when you're really there for so long in someone's suffering? Um, it's interesting also to see the types of choices that people make, and it makes people profoundly uncomfortable. Um, I think as it's designed to be,
Yeah.
because it definitely comes down to a book that's about choice and whether or not it feels as though we have a choice when there's so much at play institutions and the way that life in the world is set up, or even down to like the chemical imbalances of our brain, where um, people can say it's easy to be happy when your life is good. You have a spouse or you have a job. You live here and you're not dealing with you have a certain privileges allotted to you, where it's like depression will hit regardless. Depression doesn't care. Feeling suicidal doesn't care. A lot of people deal with those feelings. Um, and so, yeah, I just wanted to look at like choice and agency, and it's been interesting to see reader reaction.
I mean, isn't it amazing to think that like the notion of giving the reader a choice, like that power, that control in within the confines of a book, it's so daunting. Like I don't I come to a book and I expect the author to hold my hand the entire way. And you're letting us free. You're kind of like, go forth. And that's scary. But I would argue that who we are when we come out the other end is kind of wholly, like we have our own experience. That like I can say this was my experience. This is my personal experience reading this book. And that might be different than the next person or the person before me. And I don't know, like I find great value in that. So it
Mhm.
it was exciting and absolutely terrifying. So
Thank you.
thank you. But I have to ask, this is the big one. Um, is it story time? Do you
Uh,
mind sharing a little excerpt or something with us?
I would love that. I have an excerpt that I picked that's a little bit later in the book, actually. And I feel like it works perfectly with your introduction of wading into the water. This is maybe like 10 minutes if you have
Done.
time for that.
Oh, we have plenty of time. It's all yours. Everybody, this is Sophia reading from Coup de Grace.
So, um, all right. Regrettably, I'm still here, sifting through memories in delirium, miserable in the impervious gray house in the cold. The elevator has sunk me deeper because apparently there's floors below the ones listed on here. Waking up to be coughed back out onto some new territory. When it brackets its doors behind me with a sigh, it shudders out a death rattle, and they don't open again after that. New floor this time. Oh, goody. Frosted glass door like a hospital or a Belgian spa. Pushing past and on my way across the room on hands and knees. Tired. How many ways can the body be tired? What hits me first is the odor of decay, rancid and cloying, death and flowers, blood and bone. I squeeze my eyes shut, and the flint quick flash of the Lamproside footage strobes behind my eyelids. There's an unhewn gravel feel against my hands, so I drag my palm against the floor experimentally. It's all been mixes of gunmetal gray until this point, and sometimes, when it's feeling generous, a bit of rusted red, but this is something else. I smooth my fingertips across the topography. It comes away granulated, sand like grit. And when I open my eyes again, I can see not sand, but the shelled carapaces of dead insects, thousands of them, amphimelons and curled moth larvae, pupae skins, and molted cuticles, all crushed beneath me. I sit back on my heels. Pulpy excreta stick to my palms, and I wipe them off on my pant legs and finally get a good look at the room. The whole thing gives me pause. A monumental atrium with astonishing volume. It's much larger than many of the other rooms. The soaring ceiling, 50 feet up, slants off like an orthogonal mine, dimming the room cavernous. Its roof is cracked dome, ribbed like twist eyes and stained with brown grime as though it has been unearthed at some point. Fluorescent lights glower in the dim, thin shafts. It stains the atmosphere, colors the walls with an anemic complexion. Up there, almost impossible to see, a flutter of movement chandeliers over me. Winged insects drunkenly swarming against the dusty, dirty acrylic light diffusers covered in grime. They pelt themselves against the forever daylight of this place, then drop their wings, soon to die. The room is wide as it is long, the size of a throne room, though devoid of any brocade decadence or Baroque ornamentation, its walls plain, water stained concrete. At the center of the room, breaking the monotony of the expansive floors, is something holy, a baptismal font, but Enormous, this tranquil body of water the size of a small lake, rippled by the eddy of some unseen breath. Its earthy blue-green color is a shock in the world of oppressive gray. I advance. Around its edges, moss and reeds sprout from cracks in the foundation. And closer, flowers, crested iris and wild geraniums, all up, holding their heads high and spreading their petals towards a simulated sun. I feel I am like them too, touch-starved and deprived of warmth. The pool surrounding might very well be a well of embittered tears, tears of sorrow and grief, courage and endurance. How fitting it would be then for me to drown in a pit of them, drift down like a night specter into the heart of it, and find forever stillness there. The only home that I can ever have, the only one I've ever known. Thought makes me ill. Perhaps it's pumped in water from who knows where, a tributary of the St. Lawrence River, maybe. Wouldn't that be fitting? Honey. Fuck. On the ground, knees drawn up to my chin. I can feel my depression closing in on me. I want to absolve myself of the violence of this, splicing myself between hope and despair, but it feels like a prophecy, and the thought of that unmoors something in me. The providence of exactly what I came here to do, meeting me in the middle, this ugly decision, and by this, I feel in my body like a sudden cold spot of a haunted manor. It seeps across the cracked leather of my skin, a wound that bleeds me, erodes me. Perfumed strip of papier d'harmonie torn from a booklet, a light that dances, sears and curls until it is reduced to ash. Do I know why I want to die? Those reasons seem empty. What extremely personal, tragic event in a person's life should make it so that a man might want to take his own life? It's hard to tell if these things matter or not. Why are you vultures all circling me like you need a clue? Sometimes it's grueling and pointless and you want out, so you do. Point final. It's pretty explicit. Anyway, a moment like this is impossible to overlook. Tried other things, but there's no other option. After everything, this is all there is. There's no point in checking the enclaves of other halls. This room is the one. This is what it is. Murky water and crests of dirt under the nails and rocks in the pockets. I don't want to be alone for this, but I guess you're here, and it's not so bad in this room. It's quiet. It'll be better like this. Hurry, hurry. Last time when I called the hotline, they just said, get yourself as far away from the thing as possible. You're so tired from it all that reaching up over the top of the fridge is too much effort to grab the knife, so you don't even do it. That's why antidepressants have the black box label. They don't make you want to kill yourself. They just give you enough energy to finally move on it. And it might seem as though a great appetite in me has risen for it, but make no mistake, I am only tired. I stand up and then I'm grabbing handfuls of rocks, insect carapaces, catching, wriggling between my fingers, and just dumping them into the pockets of my coat, my pants. They weigh down on my meager findings. Felix's subway ticket and the coin eye skeleton's coins in my empty tackle box until my pockets are comically full. And then I wade in, and it's freezing like the St. Lawrence would be this time of year. The water slows me. My movements are sluggish, and I, a pebble on this wondrous lake, make ripples against her mirrored face, sinking deeper and deeper before taking a sure step forward off the shelf break to submerge completely into the drop off. I want to feel relief, but its edges are singed with despair. And there, reality erodes. I tip through the jaws of dark matter, tumbling into a great black nothingness, devoured into the belly of the beast. Inside, a vast, comfortless cosmic void. The water here is so cold. Trying to forget, trying to release the air in my lungs if only I could. With all the cement in me, my body feels so heavy. I'm sinking right down. No pebble pockets needed. The water is losing its icy touch. Kind of nice. Suspended up on a cloud, poised against the stars. I wish I could drift in it like this forever. If death is like this, one long kiss with slumber, it will be nice. I think about this, and I close my eyes. More maudlin goodbyes. I lower myself into that silent urn and drown. I can see the flowers growing around the base of the lake, bowing over the face of the water, constellations of indigo petals falling above me, trailing along like sylvan clouds. I read faces, shapes, and animals out of the patterns. That's called pareidolia, like gentle foam. All of it's so beautiful. If the choice is mine, I know which one to make. I don't quite know why, but I think I might want to stay. Flowers are so beautiful, but I can't have regrets, you know? In a minute, these things won't matter to me. All the rest will just be blank, empty pages. One great big ellipsis. A lapse in judgment. There's something down here with me. The inky concrete basin unfurls in murky angles. In the pit of it, invisible to me from the surface, are columns of those fused together bodies, half stripped of skin, their emptied husks vaguely visible from the dark, yearning to add nodules to their bulk. And me, staring back at them mutely, all these human, inhuman replicas, watching as I watch, sinking ever closer in the dark down there, dim and dark and cold and damp, not their eyes, but their grasping hands reaching up to me, dribbles of dark ichor ribboning out of their mouths, and I feel a dread so palpable, so full, so absolute, that the pressure of it all crystallizes in me a single capricious thought, singing with a resonance I've never known. No. My resolve breaks like waves on a cliff. Carapaces that form an enormous concussion in my pockets, monstrously heavy, sink me down into this astral stomach like a stone towards that star-white pyre of bodies blazing against oppressive blackness. As I sink closer, a clutch fruits off from the bottom of the filth, laboriously wiggling up through the cavernous depths. Cat's cradle of flesh and bone stretch and unream, severed heads rolling over the dunes of itself, delicate and elongating and hungry to ascend like a bloated fish gaping on the beach, their sickening faces bobbing up through the blackness towards me in frantic haste. Their frozen, dead eyes terrifying like the face of a Babylonian god. And it jousts me with panic like a cattle prod. I'm all animal fear. Do animals fear God? And my hands are battering against the heavy rocks in my pockets, casting them out like sins, praying my body, be lighter, be kinder. I commit myself to life. I commit myself to color. Kicking up lake sediment, churning the water with clouds of silt so I can't see anything. I can't fucking see them anymore, but I can feel them snapping at my heels with clawed hands. I know they're just behind me, close enough that if I don't kick to swim for shore for my fucking life, I know where I'll end up. Another bloated, doughy corpse digested by time like that woman's waterlogged remains in the rooftop cistern, drowned and decomposing inside the glutted belly of a colony a hollow mile beneath the surface of the earth. It's almost got me. I can feel a spindly hand grip around my ankle, and I'm thrashing hard against it, thinking, no, 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 out of air, can't breathe like this, dumping rocks, just dumping, can't look back with that split-second adrenaline panic, etching lightning channels through my arteries, lungs burning, and suddenly I'm breaking the event horizon of the water surface. I come up gasping for air, scrambling, kicking, and flailing and choking, grasping and ripping, uprooting the irises growing at the bank. All the rocks and shit come tumbling out of my pockets, and I clamber through wreckage, coughing up spittle and river water until I feel like there's nothing left. I dribble my soaking body out on the charcoal gray shore, and I think I've pissed myself, at least I'm pretty sure I have. Dotting the dry concrete wet, backing away, my palms smacking against the ground. A new life birthed by the uterine waters of this river body, a remission of my sins, a baptism, a second life, though it doesn't feel like a gift. The skin where it had touched me is raw and blistering, cyanotic, an almost welcome pain after stretches of numbness. A crushed, milky pus emits from my pores and eats away at my pant leg, so I yank it up. The proof is there, burrowing fissures into my muscle. It looks like a long tapeworm pressed up and around my instep, turning the tissue gray. I leach out a whine. I don't want to touch it. I keep cutting between looking at it, wriggling under my skin, and staring at the surface of the water. I'm just waiting for particles of it to charge the air, floating up like ash for their gurgling screams as they puncture the face of the water. They don't. It takes a couple of minutes of me sucking in sharp gulps of breath like a fish on the wharf before I realize nothing's coming out of there. Nothing is chasing me. I try to stand, and my strength exhumes from me like an ebbing tide. Adrenaline's all gone now, and I can't help but stumble drunkenly out a doorway at the back of the room. Can't remember if it was there before, but beyond it's another hallway, big surprise, and that just siphons the rest of my energy totally out. My calves are aching knots, and my chest floods heavy. I drag my wet body to a corner away from the lake room and collapse somewhere near a wall. I look down at myself. My hands are shaking, and I worry, and I worry. This place could be 100,000 square kilometers, infinitely growing like stars moving apart in a space, and I might never reach the end. Borges's Library of Babel, void of books. But what can I do? What can I do? The maelstrom of noise inside my head continues for so long. My exhaustion and fragility begin to put me to sleep in spite of it all. And when I do fall asleep, I do so all at once, like holding back the dawn that cannot be dampered.
Ugh. Oh my God, that's brutal. Oh my God, that hurts. It hurts so good. Have you
Thank
is
you.
have you read that? You've read that oodles of times. Is that the
I
like
read.
the go-to chapter?
No, I had a different chapter that's earlier that's sort of my go-to. But then I don't know. I'm like, I read it so many times that I wanted to read something different. Do you
Yeah.
guys just read from the
Yeah.
start of your book? Do you read something that feels like it gives the vibe? Do you read something that's like high octane, that's just like fun? Does it depend?
What do you
I've
say,
never read
Donna?
from this book before.
Whoa.
Oh, what a
This is
treat.
an exclusive?
It's an exclusive.
There you go. I mean, well, to answer your question, Sophie, I mean, like, yeah, there's like the war horses. Like this is the
Right.
radio hit. This is the thing that like,
It's the money beats.
yeah. But you're saying that you've only read that once before? Is that true?
Yeah, it's sort of later in the
Wow.
book, so I didn't want to be a total spoiler, but it felt like it was on topic. And when you were talking about river, water, and bodies at the start, I
Well,
was like,
synergy.
that settles it. It's
Synergy.
gonna be this one.
So what's the release for you? Like what you go through that, you read it, you share it, and then who are you on the other side? Like how do you feel?
Like as the writer?
Yeah, well, just you as the human being. Like you've just, I mean,
Mm.
yes, you as the writer, you as the person who just kind of took us on this journey. Like do you achieve a certain level of emotional catharsis reading your own material, or is it just kind of like I did that, it's done? Like I don't know, like you like there was an emotion trapped in the text and your reading unlocked it. For me, I don't know. Like did it for you?
You. It did, and it does, and I think that that is the sign of a work that's important to you as a reader
Mhm.
or as a writer, rather. Like I have come across so many people who I remember distinctly at StokerCon had gone to your reading and were like cried, like moved on a soul level by the reading that you did. Particularly, I know you're like shaking your head no, but it is true. Um, just because of the like soul and the part of yourself that you're bringing to it. And I feel that it's always really interesting to hear a writer read their own work and also see what selection they pick
Yeah.
as like the text to read, because you can really get a sense of like rhythm and cadence
Yeah.
and I don't know, the unblocking of something. So
Yeah.
that's why I
I
picked
mean,
that one.
those emotions are trapped in the text forever, and it's just the reading of it either to oneself or out loud that unlocks them. So thank
Exorcism.
you.
Sweet.
Delilah, I have to go back to this, and forgive me, but it is really it's resonated in my head ever since you spoke to this. But is the origin of "It Will Only Hurt for a Moment" that you and your husband were at a restaurant and what happened?
So we had a favorite kind of fancy, we like fine dining, and we had this restaurant we really liked when we lived in Tampa, and we had probably been there, 6 to 10 times, I guess. But we were just having like a really nice night out, and I'm a pretty cheap drunk, so I normally only get one drink. If it's a really nice time and I'm chilling, I might have two. So the second drink I ordered um, it was like it was a blueberry smash or something, and a woman came over to the table and said, "So the bartender doesn't have what you asked for. Can we make you something special?" And I said, "Oh yeah, that's amazing." And I was like, I like something sweet, floral, herbal, sour, tart, not with ice. Kind of anything that would come in a coupe and be foamy with a flower in it, I'd be real happy about. So they came back and they said the bartender made this just for you, and it was a rocks glass, no rocks. It had macerated strawberries all over it. It was super thick and it was delicious. It was super tart and super strong. And I don't remember anything after that. I lost
Oh
about
my
8 hours. Apparently, my husband had no idea. He just thought that I was drunker than usual. I ordered a third drink, which I don't know if I've ever done in our entire relationship. We got dessert. I went to the bathroom and laughed because actually I almost left my purse in there, and I had a conversation with a girl in there, and then I came out and told him about it on the way home. I took his iPhone and was playing new bands for him in the phone. He had no idea. I don't remember any of this. I greeted my children and hugged and kissed them. I said hi to my mom who'd been babysitting. I had a nice night with my husband, and then I woke up throwing up in the shower at like 2 in the morning, and I had lost everything from that pink drink. So I thought that it was like bad scallops or something. And I called the restaurant. I was like, "Can you guys check the dates on your scallops?" And I got this like very angry, brusque sounding man who was like, "Absolutely not. Like that, nothing bad happened at this restaurant. You did not get food poisoned. Everything here is on the up and up. Like you're just, I don't know if you're trying to get money out of us or what, but like don't call here again." Um, and then I went to the doctor and she's like, "Yeah, you got
Oh my
roofied."
God.
And I was
Um,
like, why would anyone do this? Like, I wasn't at a part, like, I was out with my husband, like, big wedding rings, like, having a date at a real nice restaurant. And she was like, sociopaths, 1% of the population. And I was like, so
okay.
yeah, we never went back to that restaurant.
And was there any consequence? Like, was there any follow-up? Like, that was it.
By the
That
time I got to the doctor, I threw up so hard that all the blood vessels in my eyes broke, and I had like this little mask of red. I had to
Mhm.
cancel a like I had a Zoom for Del Rey for a book, and I had to cancel it because I just looked like a death zombie. And so I went to the doctor because I was like I felt so hollowed out, and I was realizing like all of this time I lost and I couldn't remember it. And I was like, that I remember being blackout drunk a couple times in college, and like I remember it. And so we
Mhm.
went to the doctor, and she was like, "Yeah, it's out of your system." She's like, "If anything like that ever happens again, like go straight to the hospital."
Jeez, I mean that's terrifying, and I forgive me for I mean you're being very cordial and kind of talking through this with
Yeah.
us, but like so if that becomes the kind of the genesis for this novel, like what is the driving force for you? Like what is the impetus to say this happened to me and now this is where I'm going to go with it? Like
Oh, I was taking a pottery class. I take a lot of art classes. I have
mhm.
an art degree, and I just keep up with it. And and I was enjoying pottery, and then I was reading a book, and it opened in a pottery studio, and it was all wrong. And I was like, "You didn't go like I don't. You just looked at like Wikipedia. You didn't even ask somebody to double check. This is not how pottery. Like you can't bisque. Like you can't put something in the kiln that you just threw today. Like I'm so mad right now." So I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna write a book about a potter." And then I kind of started getting the idea of I was thinking about women in asylums in the 1800s, that list that goes
Yes.
around of like the things that you could be put in asylum for. It's like liking cats, hysteria, reading books. So it was this kind of synthesis of that and the things that were done to women against their will to render them more pliant and insensate, and
Mhm.
then tell them that that was perfectly fine and normal. So yeah, that's how
Um
it all came together. And then I went to I wanted to go to a retreat because I'd never been on one, and I like to do experiences so I can write about things accurately and not have an opening chapter that's that wrong. So like before I wrote a chapter about riding a camel one day, I wrote a camel. Before I had a sex scene on a trapeze in a romance book, I went on a trapeze. So I went to like this yoga Reiki retreat at this place and kind of like had a whole experience there.
yeah. You put in the time. You do the research.
I do.
And but at what extent, I mean like what consequence, I mean like I feel like, your nightmare of a story is our gain because I feel like that there's something very palpable about agency and not being in control of one's autonomy of one's body. Like I don't want to give too much away of this book because half the fun for me as the reader kind of going into this book is that I'm making these discoveries essentially kind of alongside Sarah. And it's funny, forgive me, a little sidebar, but my mother was a potter. And so I grew up, our garage of our house was actually
You
kind
had a
of
garage
renovated.
kiln.
We had a garage kiln, yeah.
Nothing like when your garage is 40 more degrees than it should be in the middle of summer.
It was a great place to be in the winter. Like it was
Cozy.
the warmest room in the whole house. But yeah, so everything felt very spot on from the kind of layman, second gen uh Potter fam
Yeah, like
kid.
every art that's happening there, I've knit, I've done calligraphy, I've done stained glass, I've done metal smithing, I've done all of it. So it's
Yeah.
it's all legit. Just like the horses in my Wake of Vulture series. Like I'm a horse girl. Like I'm here with you. You can trust me.
But at its core, there is a sense of rage. There's a sense
Oh yeah,
of
I'm real mad all the time.
but I do I'm really curious, and I want to phrase this question in a way.
I'm a pretty open book. Like I'm an open book. You can ask anything.
Well, it's about the book itself, and specifically the kind of like the packaging of it, because like it's the first time that I think I've been personally been aware of a book like I think like feminine rage is a phrase that is kind of used as like a part of the like, do you like this? Well, here you go. Like,
Yeah.
and it was really interesting because I'm thinking of the violence. I'm thinking of guillotine. Like I'm thinking of like there is a certain kind of fuel that rage provides. And for hearing you say that you're a very rageful person, that there's like an anger burning,
I'm a
uh,
woman in America. I'm pretty mad.
yeah, and that's not going away. Do you find yourself having to stoke those fires, or are they just kind of eternally lit? Like, do you like start the day angry, or like,
Oh no, no. Well it's actually it kind of ties into Sophia's work. I had a suicide attempt in high school. I was a very
Mhm.
different person before that. I was very anxious and depressed, kind of in between it just always looking towards the future with absolute dread and looking through the past with everything I'd ever done wrong. I was a real mess. After the attempt, I have been a person who lives in the moment. I'm a goldfish. I am all RAM, no memory. So I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I'm alive. This is awesome. And it's so I'm actually in a pretty good most of the time until something happens. But almost everything in my books that happens, it's infuriating, is something that's happened to me. Like in this book, Bernie, like I've had to deal with Bernies.
Yeah.
Had to deal with like there's just these people that you deal with in your life and you're like, man, what a jerk. I it must be so miserable to be that person. And I'm kind of mad in the moment, and then 10 minutes later, it kind of goes away. And then when I'm writing, I'm like, who I'm gonna eviscerate in fiction is that guy.
So I mean, to bring it back to catharsis, forgive me, like, do you find that the writing of it releases that anger, or does it just kind of give it a place to live on the
Well, it's something
page?
about, a lot of what I think a lot of what women experience in regards to being treated poorly by strangers and loved ones is that it's often not a public thing. It's usually, something that two people experience. The woman goes away going, well, I couldn't say anything because he'd kill me. And so you feel this indignity, shame, rage, frustration, all of these feelings. And that's just kind of your everyday, experience in dealing, with people who treat you as less than or other. Um, so I guess because I kind of like store those away and it's like putting them in print. It's like, look at this man, look at this horrible behavior that I have had to deal with. Oh no, oh no, these people are dead. How'd that happen? Oh no.
Um, but it's interesting when you kind of bring it back to the artist colony. Like if you think of December House, and uh, there there's a moment in the book where as I'm reading it, I'm kind of like having this kind of like epiphany of like, what initially at kind of first blush is almost considered kind of like inspiration. Like there's a almost this like muse, like this kind of supernatural muse, like kind of like, oh my gosh, like I'm tapping into something that is outside of me, but it's like it's leading me and fueling me to kind of like create something kind of outside, like I'm externalizing something that it's almost like I'm a conduit, I'm a
We're
vessel.
antennas, I
Yeah.
think is what Antoinette said, is this place is one big satellite dish.
But then when you realize that what the kind of source of that inspiration, the source of that, who the muse is and what happened to that said muse, like you realize that kind of that energy that's kind of channeling through these artists at this colony, uh, it it becomes like very haunting. Like it's like, oh no, this is like sometimes
Voices
like
want to be heard, like voices,
yeah.
people want to get heard, people have to, I mean, that's a lot of what art is saying what you have to say in a way that maybe words aren't the way, or if words you need 100,000 of them, or maybe it's you know paint or metal. Like I working with glass and with metal, like the power you feel in taking these elements that we normally see as hard and uh changeless, and forcing them through heat and sheer force of will to change. I made a knife in the forge with my friend Alex White, who's an author recently, and like my hands, I mean, I already have calluses because I weightlift, but my hands were like totally ruined, and I was like, oh my god, I'm a man of god now. Like it's amazing the way that art can make you feel through the creation of it, and then through the production of an item that didn't exist before. So even for things where you're not communicating directly trauma or pain or feelings, just the act of creation and producing something can be cathartic. You've made something, you've changed something in the world.
Yeah. So do different modes or different mediums kind of provide you with a different sense of catharsis? Like forging something out of metal versus crafting something on the page. Like, are you tapping into kind of different chambers of your own imagination or creativity? Like, like it's like, this is what I need to do today. Like, I'm gonna make this. Or is it like, I'm just gonna go with the flow?
Yeah, I used to use, before I started writing, art was kind of how I communicated, and I did murals and I did paintings, and I put a lot of feeling and emotion, and I'd scratch words into them or bleed onto them, or whatever, like getting that out. But I felt like I never quite found my body of work. And then I started writing, and I was like, this is what I was looking for the whole time. Like this is
Wow.
the way I want to feel, this tapping into flow, and just the overall long range production of a book. Like it really gets my brain in the groove like nothing else I've ever experienced. And so since I started writing, I haven't had that same need to express myself through art. So like if I'll paint somebody's dogs for their birthday, or like I painted a raven stag from Hannibal to go in we've got a taxidermy bathroom. So it's like I'll do something that's useful like that. But now art is just play for me, so I'm mainly enjoying things like glass, where like I can't control it, I can't replicate it, I don't know what'll happen. um, but it's a friendly, fun way to access flow that gives faster results than publishing.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Um, that's amazing. And it makes me want to ask the kind of the age old question, but like how, like on any given day that you're writing, how long are you kind of at the computer? Like, is it a full day? Is it a morning only, at night? Like, what is the kind of like a good day clocking in time?
My job every day is to write one chapter when I'm first drafting. I want to write a complete chapter front to back, and then switch to the next chapter and get a couple of sentences in there to establish it. So I tell myself my whole job is to write 2,000 words a day, 2,500 ish, 10 pages ish in there. And if I've done that and then attended to all of the other, the email side and the cover copy side, and I have to get all to that. But whenever it happens, it happens. I've got two teenagers who don't drive. Um, and I've got other people that count on me, and sometimes I have 4 hours of glass class when I should be editing the book that's due on Halloween. But yeah, chapter day.
Yeah. Your secret's safe. We won't tell your editor.
Hey, Alex.
But I gotta ask, you said it. You have never, ever read from It Will Only Hurt for a Moment.
Nope.
This is going to be the first time.
Yeah, I actually
Oh
don't do a
my.
lot of readings. I guess I seem to mostly do group events and cons.
Yeah.
So there's not usually those aren't ready places.
This is such a treat. We're gonna hear Delilah
Oh,
S.
build it up,
Dawson.
man. We don't know.
Oh, the bar is high. I
Yeah, the bar is very high.
This is amazing. All
Oh,
right,
I will show you
everybody.
though. I'm doing this thing right now where I did lino cut bookmarks that have to
Oh
do
my
with the
God.
book. So
That's
people
pretty
who
cool.
pre-ordered it can email
Delightful.
me, and I'll send them this and a signed book plate and all sorts of stickers and stuff. But yeah, like I'm like,
Aw.
it's an art book. Here's the art.
Um,
That H doesn't have a crossbar, but the later ones do. I carved it.
there you go. And if you want the deluxe packet, you get the knife, the forged iron knife.
No, I've only made one of those.
The deluxe packet. Only for
I stole it from Delilah's bedroom package.
All right, well, it's story time, guys. Without any further ado, Delilah S. Dawson is going to read from It Will Only Hurt for a Moment.
All right, to set this up, Sarah is at an artist retreat. She has a cantankerous studio mate and so is unable to be in the studio right now. And so she is digging a pit kiln, which is a hole in the ground that you set on fire to do interesting pottery glazes sorts of things. The idea is just a seed now, but she's warming to it. She can see the possibilities of her work webbing out, the tendrils poking up toward the sun. Tranquil Falls, this place is called. Even the name suggests a study in opposites. Can falling ever be tranquil when most falling objects break? Choosing a spot in the very center of her proposed pit kiln, she slams down the shovel blade, then steps on it to dig deeper. The ground is hard and compacted, probably contains its own share of clay, but she didn't feel the juddering clank of a rock or the thudding deadness of a root. The first spadeful of dirt is heavy, Georgia red clay mud. Satisfied, she pats it right back down, then tests a corner of the rectangle the same way. Again, just heavy soil with a few small rocks, nothing to suggest she'll have any trouble digging out the full rectangle. The second corner is fine too, but when she goes for the third corner, the shovel blade cracks into something that's definitely not dirt. When she lifts out the square of clay and scrapes the dirt away, she finds an old wood board. Sarah is not the kind of person who could stop digging at this point. Maybe she's found a rubbish heap from the resort, or maybe it's an old wagon. The history of this place calls to her and she scrapes and digs until she finds the corner. The wood is soggy like old cardboard, the rusted nail she sees askew. As she reaches down to brush the dirt off with her hand, the nail wiggles out and she holds it up to the light, marveling. It's not a modern nail with a round flat head and round shaft. It's rectangular and tapers and looks rough and humble, more real somehow than anything you would find in a yellow box at the hardware store. Such a cool artifact from a different time. She pockets it, planning to take it back to her cottage and wash it off. With the nail gone, she pries up the corner of the box. The smell that assaults her brings immediate thoughts of the dead possum she found on her bed. When she shines her phone's flashlight inside, she sees a mass of yellow hair and what can only be a skull. This time, when she rings the front door bell, Sarah is the one who is flustered. Gail arrives already annoyed by the second interruption, but when she sees Sarah's face, she can immediately tell that this isn't another polite request for a garden implement. "What's wrong?" she asks. "Coffin," Sarah manages. "Corpse." Gail cocks her head. "Are you sure? Over the years, folks have left behind a lot of junk that might..." There's a smell. That, at least, is something Gail can't allow. Sarah leads her out to the hill where the neatly planned rectangle has become an absolute mess. She had to uncover the entire thing just to be sure. Gail squats down and waddles into place, and Sarah helps her lift the corner, and this time the whole top peels back to reveal the very old body of a woman. Her long blonde hair is a tangled wreck, her face turned to the side with a few wisps of dry, leathery brown skin clinging here and there. She's wearing the tattered remnants of a long white dress over wet-looking brown bones. Gail shoots upright, stumbles back. "Oh, Lord, you weren't kidding. Smells like death." "Because it is," Sarah finishes weakly. "Maybe we should just rebury it. Let sleeping dogs lie." "No, Gail," Sarah says with more firmness than she generally possesses. "That's desecration. She deserves respect. She was someone's family." Gail gives Sarah an appraising look before gazing off in the direction of the old hotel. "Fine." They head back to December House, where Gail calls the local sheriff to report an unmarked grave. "Very old. Uh-huh. Yep. No, I'm sure it's not Native American," Gail says peevishly. "She," Sarah reminds her. Gail rolls her eyes. "Yeah, I'm sure. She has blonde hair." After a few more minutes, Gail hangs up and sighs in resignation. "They want us to protect the gravesite and leave it alone. Someone will be out this afternoon." To do what? Sarah asks. Hell if I know. I'm just glad it's not my job. So this has never happened before? Gail looks aghast at this thought. Of course not. Do I look like somebody who digs up corpses for fun? I've lived here my entire life and we've never found anything like this. It's bothering Sarah on more than one level. Is there any way that this might be a graveyard and the stones or markers or whatever were just lost in time? Oh no, Gail says, deeply affronted. Like I kept telling you, this was a posh resort, a spa. No one died here, much less got buried here. That's like asking if there's a graveyard at Disney World. Which sounds great, but it doesn't explain the presence of the coffin. And Sarah is fairly certain that somewhere under the carefully painted sheer of the happiest place on earth, bones of a certain age should be found with a little digging. Still, Gail looks more irritable than ever, and Sarah doesn't want to get on her bad side. Want me to go cover her up? She asks. Gail flaps a hand at her. Absolutely not. You go back to the studio or pick some other place to start your kiln. I'm sure this has been quite the morning for you. I'll let you know if they find out anything else. I'm sure they'll just cart her away to a real cemetery. She bustles off through the door shouting, George, get out of your dang pajamas and come help me. And Sarah knows she should go back to her cottage and wait until lunch, but the poor woman. She feels this overwhelming pity for the woman in the coffin. With hair that blonde and long, she must have been young. Maybe it was someone visiting on doctor's orders and she succumbed to her disease anyway. People died so easily back then, it seems. Before the body is carted away by people who will just view her as a work or a curiosity, Sarah has to see her again. She has to say goodbye. Knowing Gail will take a while to get George moving, Sarah hurries back out to the hill. It would feel more poetic if there were wildflowers waving or trees bending over the grave, but instead the dirt is cut with the roughness of a stab wound, the box rising like a splinter. The top is still off, lying in the grass where Gail left it. There's a ribbon at the girl's chest, moldering green, and light lace at the sleeves and hem of her dress. The bones of her hands are delicate, knotted into fists over her stomach. Goodbye, whoever you were, Sarah says. I'm so sorry I disturbed you. She's about to leave, but something is holding her here. The mountains are silent but for the pounding of the waterfall, a light breeze seeming to tug her closer. She looks again at the corpse, at the elegant bones of her face, the wild nest of her hair, the curled fingers. There's something there tangled with the slender finger bones, clutched in the long, still hands. Another old rectangular nail. And then Sarah looks at the top of the box, recently turned over. It's stained brown and covered in gouges and deep scratches. Some are from the nail, it seems, the deeper lines, but there are lighter lines too, set close together, like an animal scratching to get out. A fingernail is embedded in the wood. The woman was buried alive.
God, I love it. I love it. It's so, it's so interesting to kind of go back and hear that chapter, that section after having gone through the entire journey that, like I don't want to give anything away, but my God, like when we first encounter this character, and then we kind of learn the kind of genesis, the root of how and why. I don't know. It's just so heartbreaking. It really hurts, but in such a good way. You guys
Sorry,
hurt.
not sorry.
You guys hurt me. It's a painful night, but I feel like there's a little bit of catharsis there. Like it's a good pain.
Promised.
Thank you, Delilah. That was beautiful. Are you never ever gonna read from that ever again? Like, do we get it? Like, is it just
Well,
ours?
okay, so I apparently I've learned this is an autistic thing. I go through life assuming everyone hates me and finds me boring, and if they listen to me, they're just doing me a very kind favor, like finding a dead rat in the road, moving it off the side of the road. So I would assume no one wants to hear me read, but anytime anybody wants me to, I will.
So it's really just a matter of asking. Like, if
I
someone
mean,
asks you,
yeah.
like, yeah, sure.
I mean, not if I'm like, at Target buying raw chicken or something, but like, no, if I was at an event and someone actively wanted a reading done, I would read. I don't want to bore anybody, and I assume I always am.
Yeah. That just blows my mind. I mean, I hear this a lot, and because we were talking about Chuck Wendig earlier, like nobody, like Chuck doesn't want to read. Nobody wants to read. Like everybody, but this
I think it's because
blows
we
my
assume
mind.
nobody wants. I mean, I was told at one of my first book events that nobody wants to hear authors read.
I I want to
Disagree.
say no. No, that is not true. We want to hear. I want to hear. Damn it. But there you go. All right. We're close to wrapping up. you guys have been such troopers. I really appreciate you kind of spending time and going a little bit longer than I had asked. So I want to say thank you, and thank you for those who are tuning in and listening. But I have two last questions. I'm going to split it up. I'm going to give Sophia one. I'm going to give Delilah the other. But Sophia, can you remember the first thing that scared you? Like, can you remember the book, the movie, the friend, the sibling, the family member? Like, what was like one of those first kind of pivotal, kind of scary moments as a child?
Um, the first thing that's coming to mind is I remember having this nightmare where I went on a school field trip. I must have been like 6 or 7 when I had this dream. I was going on a school field trip and we went into this warehouse, and all along it was like a huge wall that was like 100 feet high, and there was a big fan that was slowly turning. And then on the ground, there were little narrow passages that were dividing up into a grid, all of these holes of water. And I was trying to like walk on this like tightrope almost between these holes. Um, and then I realized that I had submechanophobia, which is the phobia of like machinery in water.
Oh my
Um,
God.
so like a toilet tank scares me, man. Like a wave pool, the machine in a wave pool. Like, yeah, I don't know if that was from seeing Titanic too young or what, but that's one that came early and stayed.
Oh my God. Wait, that just blows my mind. I mean, you were writing coup de grace before, like, you were having these dreams of architecture and machinery and subterranean kind of like
Mm.
liminal spaces from the get-go. Like, this has just been a part of your life.
Yeah, what's really weird is there's a whole like subreddit for submechanophobia. Like people will post images to try to like trigger the phobia in themselves. My brother has the same phobia. I'm like, what traumatic incident did we both go through? Or was there something that happened to us in a previous life? Why do we both have this very specific phobia? Um,
Oh my
couldn't
God.
go in a pool when I was a kid when the little pool cleaner vacuum machine was in there. Freaks me out. I mean, that ties
Yep.
into the scene that I just read. That didn't like it
Yeah.
wasn't a conscious thing, but yeah, as early as I
No,
can remember, machines and water. Hate that.
no wave pools for Sophia. Fair
Certainly
enough.
not.
Delilah, can you remember the first time that you actively scared someone else? Like, it could have been a prank, it could have been a story, something you did, but like, what was that first moment when you said to yourself, "Oh, I can do this?"
I'm changing this to the best time I ever scared someone. When I was
Perfect.
16, I worked in a haunted house. In this haunted house, everyone started in the zombie maze, and if you did well enough, they moved you out to different scenes because it was the zombie maze was inside, dark, everything painted black, fog everywhere. It's kind of hard to mess up in there. And then the rest of it was outside, so you walked through it, and there were, it was all over an abandoned office park. So when I worked my way out, I got there one night and they had too many people there, and all of the places were filled in. And they're like, well, we don't need you, go home. Well, I just driven an hour out here. I wanted to get my money. And I was like, no, I'll find a place. So I did a walkthrough to see where nobody was, and there was nobody at the body bag scene, and there never was. There'd never been anybody. It's just they had leaves tied up in what looked like body bags in a pile. So I was like, put me in one of those body bags. And so they had them kind of rumple me up into this pile of fake body bags, and I would just wait there, like holding perfectly still. And like, this is the time before cell phones. I'm just out in the middle of the forest with whoever's there. And like this like group of like teenagers from like a slasher film walked up, and the guy was like, this is stupid. I'm not scared. You can't scare me. These aren't even body bags. And he like kicked him, and I just reached out and grabbed his ankle, and he peed himself.
That's
And
beautiful
it was just
karma.
like, this is what I was born to do, is frighten jocks.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
You two are the best. Everybody, let's give it up for the author of Coup de Grace, Sofia Ajram. This book is out from Titan Books. It is out there now.
Titan.
Go Titan, go Titan.
Love Titan.
It will only hurt for a moment, it is Delilah S. Dawson out from Del Rey right now, but this might be it. You might never, ever, ever hear it again. So, guys, this was it. We did it. It was beautiful.
It
Thank you
happened.
so much for sharing. This was, I don't know, you guys, you spoiled me. So thank you. Thank you.
It was awesome. Thanks so much for having us.
Oh yeah, this
Anytime.
is grad.
Have a wonderful night. Stay scary. Um, be safe out there, everybody.
Stay away from
Bye.
body bags.
Bye.